There is a truth nobody warns you about. Not your doctor, not your children, not the culture that spent decades telling you what a man is supposed to want. The truth is this: somewhere past 60, after enough silence, enough mornings alone, enough evenings with no one to perform for, something in you goes quiet, and then, slowly, it goes free. This is not a video about anger. This is not a video about resentment, or scores being settled, or old wounds being reopened. This is a video about what happens when a man finally stops spending energy he doesn't have on approval he never needed. Most people look at a man in his 60s living alone, and they see someone who didn't make it. A cautionary tale. Evidence of failure. But that is the wrong lens entirely. These men are not broken. They are awake. They have crossed a threshold that most people spend their entire lives approaching but never reaching. The place where the opinion of others simply loses its grip. You have earned that threshold. The question is whether you are willing to walk through it. Because here is what nobody tells you. Time at your age is not a river. It is a reservoir, and it is not being refilled. Every hour you spend managing someone else's perception of your life is an hour you will not get back. Every decision you make to preserve the comfort of people who are not living your days is a small surrender of the life that belongs only to you. In the next few minutes, we are going to look at 4 specific shifts, 4 things that change at a biological and psychological level when a man chooses sovereign solitude over the exhausting theater of family approval. These are not theories. They are patterns I have observed in men who made the turn, and if you have already begun to feel them, what follows will give you the language for what is happening inside you. 1. Your nervous system stops running on other people's emergencies. Ask yourself something honest. How many times in the last year did you alter your mood, your plans, or your peace because of a phone call that wasn't yours to answer? A family drama that had nothing to do with you but somehow required your energy, your presence, your emotional labor. Here is what is happening beneath the surface of that. When we are embedded in family systems, especially as men who were trained from birth to be providers and fixers, our stress response becomes entangled with everyone around us. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, does not distinguish between your emergency and someone else's. The moment you perceive a threat to your family's stability, your body treats it as your crisis, every time. Cortisol, simply put, is the chemical your body releases when it believes you are in danger. In small doses, it is useful. Across decades of absorbing other people's urgencies, it becomes corrosive. Researchers refer to the cumulative damage of chronic stress as allostatic load, the total wear on your body from years of your system never fully coming down from high alert. 2 terms, 1 conclusion. The approval loop is not just emotionally costly, it is physically expensive. I have seen many men in their 60s describe the same phenomenon. After enough time alone, genuinely alone, not lonely but solitary, they notice something unexpected. The calls that used to spike their anxiety begin to feel distant, not because they stopped caring about their family, but because they stopped treating every family signal as a 5-alarm fire requiring their immediate response. Their body, slowly, learned a different baseline. The Stoics called this the practice of indifference to externals. Epictetus put it plainly: some things are within our power, and some things are not. The emotional temperature of your adult children's lives falls firmly in the second category. You were not designed to regulate it, and your body already knows this. It has been trying to tell you for years. The actionable shift here is simple, though not always easy. Identify 1 recurring family obligation, a call, a visit, a group message thread that consistently costs you more energy than it restores. Not the relationship itself, the obligation, and begin deliberately to reduce your reactive participation in it. This is not withdrawal. It is the beginning of proportional engagement. But there is something even more fundamental than your nervous system, something that changes in the very way you construct meaning, and that is where the second shift lives. 2. You stop needing to be understood, and that changes everything. What does a man in his 60s want at the deepest level from his family? Not money, not logistics. He wants to be known. He wants the people he spent his life for to look at him and recognize who he actually is. Not the role he played, not the version of himself he performed at the dinner table, but the man underneath all of it. The painful truth is that this is rarely what happens. Adult children see fathers through the lens of their own childhoods. Siblings see brothers through the distortions of old family mythology. Spouses, or former spouses, carry decades of narrative that has very little to do with who you are today. You cannot control any of these lenses. You cannot argue someone into seeing you clearly. And the attempt to do so, the constant low-grade effort to correct the record, to be seen accurately, to be understood, is one of the most exhausting things a human being can do. Carl Jung described a process he called individuation, the long journey toward becoming a whole, integrated person, no longer defined by the expectations of your family of origin or the social mask you wore to survive. This is not a young man's process. Jung believed it accelerates in the second half of life, precisely because the urgency of external performance begins to fade. What you thought you needed from your family, their understanding, their validation, their approval of your choices, you discover you can generate internally. I have seen many men describe a particular moment. It is different for each of them, but the structure is the same. A conversation with a family member, an adult child, a sibling, a former partner, goes the same way it always goes. The man says something true about himself. The family member hears it through the same old filter. Nothing lands as intended. And instead of feeling the familiar frustration, the man feels something unexpected. Nothing. Not defeat. Not resignation. Just the clean, quiet recognition that he has stopped needing the conversation to go differently. That moment is not failure. That moment is liberation. The concrete practice here is this. Write down, somewhere private, 3 things that are true about who you are today, not who you were, not who your family believes you to be, that you no longer need anyone else to confirm. Read them in the morning. They are your territory. Guard them accordingly. Which brings us to the third shift, and this one surprises people most. 3. Your relationship with time changes at the cellular level. Most men do not recognize this shift until it has already happened, but when it does, it is unmistakable. Psychologists who study decision-making have documented what they call time horizon, the length of the future a person is actively planning for and emotionally invested in. When time horizon shrinks, something counterintuitive occurs. People become more selective, not about the big decisions, about the daily ones. Who they spend an afternoon with, what they are willing to tolerate in a conversation, what they say yes to, and what they allow themselves to refuse. This is not pessimism, it is biological clarity. The brain of a man in his 60s is genuinely different from the brain of the same man at 40. Research in behavioral neuroscience consistently shows that as people age, they shift their emotional priorities from information gathering to meaning maximization. In plain terms, you stop tolerating things that waste your time because your nervous system has recalibrated around what actually matters. I have seen many men describe a version of this. A family gathering that would have been mandatory at 50 becomes optional at 65. Not because the man has grown cold, because he has grown honest. He looks at 5 hours of performance, noise, and small conflict, and his internal accounting system, sharpened by decades, simply says, "This is not where I want my hours to go." His family calls it selfishness. He calls it sanity. Both of them are describing the same behavioral change. Only one of them understands it. The practice. Before agreeing to any family obligation that costs you more than 4 hours of your time, apply a single, honest question. If this were the last month of my life, would I choose to spend this time this way? You do not need to share the question with anyone, but you must be willing to live with the answer. There is one more shift. It is the quietest one, and in some ways the most powerful, because it does not announce itself. It simply arrives.
4. Solitude stops feeling like a condition and starts feeling like a kingdom. The culture has a story about the older man living alone. It is a story of lack, of absence, of something that should be there but isn't. The empty chair, the silent house, the man who has been left behind. That story is wrong. Not partially wrong, structurally wrong. Seneca wrote, "Recede inte ipse," retire into yourself. What he meant and this is worth sitting with, is that the external world will always produce noise, demand, and distraction. The man who has not built an interior life has nowhere to go when the external world finally quiets. But the man who has cultivated his own interior kingdom, when the house empties and the phone goes silent, he is not alone in an empty room. He is finally home. I have seen many men make this turn. Some of them made it reluctantly, after divorce or estrangement, or simply the gradual drift that comes with age. Some made it deliberately, after looking at what their social performance was costing them and deciding the price was too high. What they share, every single one of them, is this: the fear of solitude was worse than the solitude itself. Once they stopped fighting the silence gave them back to themselves. The concrete shift here is not about becoming a recluse. It is about becoming intentional. Choose 3 hours per week, not more to start, that are protected. No family calls, no obligation, no performance. Your books, your projects, your walk, your silence. These hours are not selfish. They are structural. They are the foundation on which everything else in your life will either rest or collapse. Your family does not have to understand this. They do not have to approve. That is, in fact, precisely the point. You have spent 60 years, perhaps more, building something. The discipline, the endurance, the hard-won knowledge of what matters and what doesn't. The calluses on your hands and on your conscience. The long, quiet understanding that most of what people argue about doesn't deserve the energy they burn on it. That accumulation is not nothing. It is a fortress. And a fortress is not built to be walked through by whoever happens to feel entitled. Your family loves you. In many cases, that is true. And love does not grant anyone the authority to govern your days, dictate your choices, or extract your remaining energy without your consent. Love and boundary are not opposites. They coexist in every healthy relationship that has ever existed. What you are building now, this sovereignty, this solitude chosen rather than suffered, is not a wall against love. It is the structure that makes love sustainable. On your terms, in your time, at your pace. You spent a long time building this fortress. No one enters without your permission. Drop a comment below. I want to hear from the men who have made this turn. Not the theory of it, the moment, the specific conversation, the specific morning, the specific silence where something in you shifted and you realized you were no longer waiting for anyone's approval to live your own life. This is a conversation between men who have been through something. Not a lecture, a debrief. Tend your kingdom wisely.